Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Cover One Roundup here live. We're actually live this week, just as we are most Monday nights at 7 p.m. here on the Cover One YouTube channel, or subsequently wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, Kyle Salagi, joined this and every week by David Fox. And today, we've got a nice podcast for you because training camp starts in like 2 weeks, I think. It's not next week. I think rookies report next week. And then when we do a show in 2 weeks from now, camp itself will be underway. But we did some training camp preview last week on our 4th of July show that was pre-recorded. We also, I think we've done a few training camp episodes in general. So we're taking a little training camp break, if you will, because that's all Bills coverage is going to be for the next however many weeks, and then training camp, preseason, regular season. It's all ramping up here. So this is kind of the last opportunity to do something a bit more fun, a little more I don't know. Is it fun? Are tier lists still fun? I don't know. But today we'll
find out.
We are going to do a tier list of not every move. That would be a lot of moves that Brandon Beane has made throughout his tenure as Buffalo Bills general manager. But we are going to rank every significant move, as you can see on the screen here, every significant move that Brandon Beane has made as Buffalo Bills general manager will be ranked in tiers, as I just said. So before we get into that, David, what's going on?
My parents are gallivanting across Europe, so I have the house to myself. And that changes basically nothing that I'll do for the next 3 weeks. So
Very nice.
We're doing great.
Well, as I said off air, this means you can throw parties every weekend now.
And if I knew or had any friends in this area, I totally would.
Everyone in chat is invited to the party at David's house this weekend. I won't be there, but I trust that the chat's going crazy right now. I'm sure everyone in chat's gonna show up to your house. So there was no Bills news this week, really, besides Josh Allen being at where was he? He was at some golf tournament and he was bombing balls.
He's always golfing.
He's always golfing, and he's not as good of a golfer. For how often he golfs, he's not as good of a golfer as he should be. I say this as someone who does not golf, and if I tried to golf, I would be laughable, maybe the worst of all time. But Josh Allen, for how often the dude talks about golfing, you'd think he would be much better than he is. So he did some like celebrity golfing tournament this weekend, and on his drive, he got it onto the green, which, from my understanding, is a good thing. That's what you want to do. You want to get the ball onto the green on your drive. So it was a very makeable birdie, I think. I think that's the one where you get it 1 under or 2 under. I don't know. He should have got it under par. He ended up going over par, which is not good. And 17 got intercepted by a little kid. He also did that. He also got a pass intercepted by a child. And I saw a tweet where it was like Bill Belichick is tracking down this child to ask him how he did that, which is hilarious. So that's the roundup, a little bit of an impromptu roundup there. So before we get into the tier list, because David, you and I tend to ramble a bit, so I feel like I feel like this could go on for a bit, so we should get started sooner rather than later. But before we do that, any other housekeeping things to take care of?
I think we're good, actually. Surprisingly, weirdly, let's just get into it.
I actually thought of something. I'm sure if you're watching this particular show, you like Cover One in general, and I'm sure you're subscribed to the channel. But if you are not, for some reason, or not subscribed to any of the podcast feeds, please consider subscribing, 1, to the YouTube channel, and 2, to the podcast feeds for the respective shows. A lot of great content here, not only on the Cover One website on the written side, but also here on the channel. Film Room coming up tomorrow. I don't know if it's been announced yet, but fun Film Room coming up tomorrow. Night, Tuesday night, and then Disguised Coverage, always putting out great stuff. Cover One Buffalo, going deep. Terrific content. That's the word I'm looking for. Terrific content consistently, not on Monday night, on the other nights on the Cover One YouTube channel. Great stuff coming out, and then on Mondays we do this show. So yes, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, which again I'm sure you all have. So it's time to get started here. This right here is a tier list, and it's not showing. It's fine. This isn't what I wanted it to show, but it's going to show it anyway. Now we get ads. No more ads. So
There we go.
Brandon Beane has been the Buffalo Bills general manager he's going into what, years 5, year 6? I think year 6 he's going into.
Yeah.
17, 18, 19, 20. Yes. Okay. So he's going into year 6, and he has made pound for pound some of the best decisions in franchise history. And he's also made a few stinkers. Far more good decisions than he's made bad decisions. But that's what we're here to discuss today. We are here to look, as I said at the top of the show, at the significant decisions that Brandon Beane has made throughout his tenure and rank them on this tier list. So let's break down what the tiers are here. We have best tier. S tier is best tier. And then at the bottom, we have to be determined, which is obviously self-explanatory. And then also worst one yet. These two tiers, best tier and worst one yet, will not be utilized until the very end of the show, which I will explain later.
I think they call that a tease.
They do. Kyle. They do call that a tease. And I'm one of the best in the business at teasing and taking segues. So we also have great move, Brandon. Awesome job. This is for the moves that were great moves, Brandon. Awesome job. Also, good stuff. This was it wasn't a great move, but it was good, right? Kind of under the radar, good move. It's self-explanatory. Completely average job, Brandon. It's fine. Didn't really move the ticker one way or the other. Whatever. Not a good move. Again, that's for bad moves. And then, so at the end of the show, we will look at the moves that we have put in these 4 categories. In great move, Brandon, awesome job, good stuff. Completely average job, Brandon, not a good move. And we will take one from the great move category and deem it his best, and we will take another from the not a good move category and deem it as his worst. Fairly self-explanatory stuff. You've all seen tier lists, I'm sure. So, I think
now it looks like we're missing one. Is there a Let's Go Brandon tier? Or...
No, there's not. No, we don't. There's not a Let's Go Brandon tier. And I definitely didn't consider making that. Definitely did not. Okay, moving on. Brandon Beane was not he was not in charge of the Bills in the 2017 draft. He was hired shortly after the draft, after the Bills parted ways with Doug Whaley. So Brandon Beane is not, we can't give him credit for Micah Hyde. We can't give him credit for Jordan Boyer or any of that stuff, any of those 2017 key offseason moves. Tre'Davious White, we can't give him credit for, can't give him credit for the 2017 draft, but we can give him credit for the 2017 training camp trade of Sammy Watkins. David, as I open up a caffeinated beverage here because I'm falling asleep, what do you remember of the Sammy Watkins trade?
Here's what I remember. I remember the first preseason game. They opened up that offensive drive throwing. I think they threw to Sammy Watkins 4 or 5 times. I was like, oh, yeah, let's get Sammy Watkins involved. Let's get this dude involved. I love Sammy Watkins. He's from where I grew up. When the Bills drafted him, yeah, of course they traded way more than they should have because Doug Whaley couldn't help himself. But I was like, yeah, let's get Sammy Watkins. I love Sammy Watkins. So I was like, finally he's going to get super involved. And then when they traded him, I was like, oh. So they were just exhibiting him to everyone as a way to sell him, basically. I remember being surprised. And then I was like, you know what? This pretty good trade overall. Was it a second or a first that they got out of that?
It was a second round pick that they got in exchange for Sammy Watkins, which, again, I wrote down the trade details here. In exchange for Sammy Watkins to the Los Angeles Rams, the Buffalo Bills received E.J. Gaines and a second round draft pick. Now, the player for player side, Sammy Watkins never turned into the player that a lot of people thought Sammy Watkins was going to be, that he showed flashes of being early on in his career in Buffalo. But Sammy Watkins is still bouncing around the league. He just signed in Green Bay to be, he's going to blow it up or, do really well with Aaron Rodgers. Watch that. But they get EJ Gaines in return. EJ Gaines has been with the Bills like 3 times at this point, but I don't know if he ever played other than 2017. And he was a perfectly serviceable quarterback or cornerback in that 1 year in Buffalo. Played pretty well opposite Tre'Davious White. Really was part of that first elite secondary of that we've come to know and love here in Buffalo with Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, and Tre'Davious White. And EJ Gaines was that first boundary cornerback opposite Tre'Davious White, and the Bills still really haven't been able to figure that out. So EJ Gaines, a nice return, and then also they get the second round pick in the 2018 draft, which they ultimately use to package and then move up for Josh Allen in the 2018 draft. So in exchange for Sammy Watkins, the Bills receive EJ Gaines and part of the package for Josh Allen. This is difficult. Where do you want to put this?
I feel like this has to be at least good stuff. It could be great move, Brandon, awesome job. If they had I don't really know. I don't know. I think
it's hard.
Because, like, getting a starting corner, even if it was only for one season, like, he played well in that one season, and that one season took them to a playoff run.
Right, kind of.
And
objectively, yes. Subjectively, no.
But, and I think part of I'm tempted to do great move because it finally just excised them from having to deal with Sammy Watkins. Like, they know he had to make a decision, and instead of like waiting and seeing and maybe having to deal with whatever drama might have taken place during the season and after the season, he just said, we're just going to take what we can get out of this, and we're going to move on, and we're just going to start fresh. We got to start over, and I'd rather do it sooner rather than later. So, and he got a good return out of this, obviously. I mean, getting a starting corner, even for a single season, and a second round pick that they used to end up getting their franchise quarterback.
This was a trade. Jason writes average job, which we might just have to level out here to good stuff, because I would list. Oh, I can edit these. Cool. Like I would listen to the average job argument. Like, I remember just the mindset I was in after the Bills traded Sammy Watkins. I was like, they are going to lose every game this year because
100%.
They had no one. They got Jordan Matthews, who we'll talk about here in the next trade, but he was a nobody. Look at that receiving core. Who did they have? They had after. I don't even know if I could name a player they had in that receiving core still.
Hold on. Let's do this. We can think of this.
It was Jordan Matthews.
2017
receivers. Charles Clay was a tight end, but he was
Deontay Thompson.
Oh boy. They got him later.
Colts hero Deontay Thompson.
Right. They would later get Kelvin Benjamin, which we'll talk about, but it was just, again, that trade.
Zay Jones was on the team at that point.
He was, yes. He was a rookie. I forgot about that. I forgot that was his rookie year. But so the trade left them with nothing, and it's a trade that kind of, I feel like obviously in hindsight, it's because it worked out, it's great. But like at the time, I don't know if Brandon Beane legitimately thought that EJ Gaines was going to be a serviceable second cornerback, and that they were going to make the playoffs, and then they were going to use the second round pick to then trade up and get the best quarterback in the NFL. It played so well.
Right. But like trading Sammy Watkins for whatever they got, I mean, and it ended up being a premium pick overall. What they did with it doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters a little bit for people who like the Buffalo Bills, obviously, but also like what would they have gotten if they had just like re-signing him was not really an option because he didn't want to be here and he was going to cost too much money. Right. And the Bills didn't have any money at that point. And keeping him for the season was not really going to change their fortunes to an immeasurable, in any way, really.
Right. And they make the playoffs regardless.
What was the point in keeping Sammy Watkins for that season if you weren't going to keep him moving forward with this new coach and this new regime? take what you can get for him, and what they got was a second round pick.
I think
Good
stuff. I think that is a good resting place there for the Sammy Watkins trade. Not one of his best moves, but still a good move considering, again, Sammy Watkins didn't want to be here, has come out and stated that, they he did not want to be in Buffalo in 2017. And obviously they move on from him and his career goes one way. Brandon Beane just turns out it's the first of what would be many solid trades from Brandon Beane. On the same day, almost simultaneously, I actually believe they announced the trades at the same time, if I remember correctly.
It was very close, if not simultaneously.
The Bills trade Ronald Darby. At that time, what was he? A second-year corner? Or a third-year corner?
He was drafted in Rex's first year. So that was 2015. So this would have been going into his third year.
All right, so third-year corner Ronald Darby, who again was going to be the number one cornerback, presumably opposite Tre'Davious White, who at the time was just the 27th overall pick in the draft. So people really didn't know what to expect from Tre'Davious White.
Yeah.
No, we didn't expect him to come out and be a lockdown cornerback straight away. So again, at the time, it was like you're trading Ronald Darby to the Philadelphia Eagles for Jordan Matthews and a third-round pick. That was the return, right? Yes, it was. So for me, this goes in either good stuff or completely average job. Like I'll put it in completely average job for now because Jordan Matthews was a non-factor here in his year here. I think he leaves after the season. He was a pending free agent, so he leaves after the season. The Bills don't get anything for him. And then the third round pick turns into Harrison Phillips, who again, was a serviceable defensive tackle, got better as his career progressed here once he finally recovered from that ACL tear. He was playing well near the end of last season, then he cashes in and goes to the Minnesota Vikings. So
shout out to John Herring. We appreciate you showing up even with the vid. We do appreciate any and all of our loyal and wonderful, gentle listeners of the podcast and viewers.
That's rough. T's and P's, John.
Thank
you for tuning in. So yeah, completely average job for me, just because again, it was a big move at the time, trading a third-year cornerback who was going to be your number one for nothing. Not nothing, but like I remember at the time being like, I don't know why you would trade him because Sammy Watkins, again, pending free agent, didn't want to be in Buffalo. Ronald Darby, at least it didn't seem as though he had any issues with being in Buffalo. Like I could understand maybe he wasn't a scheme fit, but like also he was in his early 20s, still had a few years remaining on his contract. It just seemed like a weird player to trade for a team that, again, you make these trades, it signals rebuild. It signals we're not going to be very good. We kind of want to load up on draft picks here. So to trade a player like Ronald Darby, it was strange. Again, kind of ends up being a nothing trade because Jordan Matthews leaves. Harrison Phillips is a fine player. And then Ronald Darby, what did he turn into? He's kind of bounced around a little bit.
He won a Super Bowl with the Eagles, and that was pretty much it. Like he made his claim. He was actually pretty important to that Super Bowl run. Mm-hmm. He actually got hurt in like that week 1 game against the Washington blank team that was soon to be named the Washington football team and Washington Commanders. And then he came back. He played a great game against Dallas that year. Basically just like shut down Dez Bryant, and that whole game was hilarious to watch. Dallas just completely crumble on national television, as it always is whenever that happens. But he was good for the Eagles that year, but he just kind of he is a very like whenever he signed somewhere else, it's always like, oh, I remember Ronald Darby. Wasn't he really good? And then everybody that's like been a fan of a team he's been on is like, not really.
Right, no, he's fine. Like I remember, I have a cousin who's a Eagles fan, and he messaged me because again, very different fortunes at this time between Eagles fans and Bills fans in 2017. Yes. And he messaged me after the trade, and he was like, "How's Ronald Darby?" And I was like, "No, good young corner. Maybe he can develop into something for you. How's Jordan Matthews?" He's like, "He sucks." And I was like, "Well, actually, Ronald Darby sucks too." Like I was very, very offended that he would talk poorly about my new wide receiver. But I think completely average job, Brandon. It pretty much sums it up with Ronald Darby. Again, could have been a lot worse had Ronald Darby developed into the player that at times it looked like he could be. Again, second round pick out of FSU in 2015. But he never consistently became that player. And again, the return wasn't anything bad. So whatever. Completely average job. So now we have Marcell Dareus.
I remember you mean Darcel Marius.
Darcel Marius, of course. Yeah, Darcel Marius. At this trade, like, Bills fans were just so sick of Marcell Dareus at this point because the Bills had kind of done like a nice little stretch of just dragging his name through the mud. Like, I remember in training camp, Sean McDermott did an interview with Joe Biscaglia, I think, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm not sure if Marcell's on the bus." And it's like, this is the former third overall pick, one of your presumably key defensive players, and you're just doing an interview where you're like, "Yeah, I don't know if he's bought in. I don't know. We just don't know." And then they trade him for a 5th round pick. And then when it happened, people were just like, finally, he's gone. Like, Marcell Dareus is finally gone. We don't have to hear about Marcell Dareus anymore. But like, if you critically thought about it for a second, it was like, this is a dude who is like 4th in all-time sacks for the Bills from the defensive tackle position, or I don't know if he was up there, right? And he was still relatively young. And they just traded him for a 5th round pick to Jacksonville. And then Jacksonville went on to, that was the year they made their run, right? 2017.
That was right. They went to the AFC Championship, lost to New England. And, for them, it made perfect sense because that defense really ran through that defensive line. And having a great rotation, then adding Marcell Dareus halfway through really made sense for them. I mean, the thing is, though, like, after that, I haven't heard a thing from Marcell Dareus after that.
That's the thing.
Which is a shame because, like,
nothing.
Like, when he first came into the league, he was having like issues just like really acclimating, I think. But once he got into a groove, especially with like Pettin and with Jim Schwartz, I mean, there were times where he was just utterly dominant and like a genuinely great player, and then he just kind of fell off a cliff with Rex and company. And like, honestly, who can blame him? But it seemed like he just completely lost his motivation. And it probably, at least to him, felt like, oh, now I get to go to Jacksonville and they're gonna go on a run and they're playing well this year. And like, he played fine down the stretch for them, but then it just sort of fell apart. And it seems like he's a player that like requires he seems like very high maintenance player, and it's just like, I don't have time or patience for that. Like, I'm not here to coddle you into being a good football player. Like, go out there and do what you're supposed to do. That's my old man take of the day. I know I sound like an old man, but like you should not, your motivation should not come from other people, basically, is what I'm saying. It can definitely be hampered and taken away by other people and what they do around you, especially in those settings. And like, Rex obviously was not good at that at all because he just created such a stupid, dumb, bad culture that entirely revolved around him and his clownery. But
you sound like a Rex Ryan fan.
But when you do get that chance, which he did, I mean, he got his chance to go to a different team in Jacksonville, and he was fine, and then that was it. Nothing else happened with Marcell Dareus. I mean, like, he just fell off the map. I mean, did he ever officially retire, or is he technically still out there? Like,
is he still bouncing around? Can I see Marcell Dareus in the USFL?
Oh man, can we?
I hope so. I would. If Marcell Dareus did like a pay-per-view workout, I would pay to watch it just to see what he's up to. I would love to see just what Marcell Dareus is doing. He should have enough money to, just be living a comfortable life right now. But they do get a 5th round pick from Jacksonville, which again at the time was like weird return, but again, he really wasn't doing much and wouldn't go on to do much in his NFL career. That 5th round pick turns into Wyatt Teller, who would end up being a very good player, just not for the Bills. We'll talk about Wyatt Teller later. I feel like that's going to go in one of these categories, but so yes, we'll have some Wyatt Teller takes later. But with Marcell Dareus, again, a nothing player. You get a return that could have been something, but ends up being nothing. Average job, good stuff. What are we thinking?
I'm gonna go with
even.
We'll go with average job, just because, like, you know, this is what they needed to do. It's what they did, and you know, it is what it is, and it's an unfortunate divorce that had to happen.
Right.
And they managed to get something out of it instead of just, you know, cutting him for literally nothing, which I think was what they were planning on doing before Jacksonville came in with an offer. But yeah, it's just it is what it is. It's an unfortunate mess, but they got something out of it, and that something could have been really, really great if other things didn't happen.
John writes, was Brandon Beane even our GM during that time?
Yes.
He was. He had just come over from Carolina, which is also where Kelvin Benjamin played. Kelvin Benjamin.
I don't know her.
He was a what was he, 2013, 2014 draft pick?
2014 draft pick.
Again, just looked at as this dude who, you know, was just, people often critiqued him because he couldn't separate, but it was like he was just so big that was the separation, right? He was just bigger.
His first year with Carolina was like genuinely really good because he just won so many jump balls and was really good in the red zone. And then he got hurt in 2015. Which,
he comes back.
Interestingly enough, 2015 was the year the Panthers went 15-1 and made the Super Bowl. Not saying there's a correlation. I'm not implying anything. I'm not saying there's a correlation between successful teams and not having Kelvin Benjamin. I'm not saying that. The people are saying it. I think. I mean, I've heard it.
I've said it. No, yeah, I've heard it for sure.
People have said it. He comes back in 2016. And kind of just seems like nothing. Like,
do you remember that training camp photo of Kelvin Benjamin?
Oh man, do I ever?
Just a big boy. Just comes in as a big boy. And that was funny. And people were like, maybe something's up with Kelvin Benjamin. Again, kind of quiet in 2016. 2017, the Bills, who had traded Sammy Watkins in the offseason or in training camp, they find themselves in like contention at the trade deadline, October 31st. I vividly remember this. They find themselves in contention, and it's like, what's going on? Like, this offense is awful. The defense is okay, but not great, but they're winning games. And they could realistically break the playoff drought that year. So in desperate need of a number one wide receiver, they go out and you know, acquire a guy that Beane and McDermott are familiar with, trading 3rd and 7th round draft picks to the Carolina Panthers for Kelvin Benjamin. Not a great trade in hindsight, but at the time I was all for it. Yeah. I think a lot of people were all for it. I was going crazy about Kelvin Benjamin. I even had gaslighted myself throughout the season, throughout the 2017 season, into thinking Kelvin Benjamin was good and was making impacts on the field.
Like, I remember, you know who else gaslighted himself into not only thinking that Kelvin Benjamin was good, but needed to be extended before the 2018 season even started?
Oof, that's a bad one.
You know who said that? That was our very own Aaron Quinn, who wrote an entire article on Cover One about it. So,
Aaron, what are you doing?
I will remember that until the day I die.
Extend KB. Oh, that's great.
And Aaron, as he often does, he will 100% own up to it, and he will totally admit that he was 100% wrong. But I mean, his reasoning at the time was not bad. It was just that, you know, he didn't know what the people inside the Buffalo Bills knew about Kelvin Benjamin and how atrocious that 2018 season would be for him. And
Right.
it was truly, it's astounding.
Fell off a cliff.
I distinctly remember that Chargers game. That was Josh Allen's first NFL start. And he looked exactly as I had feared at that point. He looked like a chicken with his head cut off. And I was so frustrated, not only with having Josh Allen on the team, obviously that's changed. But at the time, I was very frustrated with this Bills team getting blown out because they didn't know what Nate Peterman was and got destroyed by the Ravens in week 1. Then they throw out a completely unprepared Josh Allen to get worked over by the Chargers. So I was so frustrated. I actually bought Game Pass so I could go through the Chargers game, and I distinctly remember a Kelvin Benjamin play, or a play that he was on the field, and I'm like trying to chart these routes on like these 3x5 note cards, and I'm looking and I'm like, what the hell is he trying to run? I to this day, I have no idea what, I don't remember what play it was. I don't remember what exactly, but I was just like, what is he trying to run? This is not a route. This is just like this. I could not make sense of anything he was doing on that particular play. And that's when I put the pen down. I was like, oh my God, what is happening? They can't even get one of their receivers to run a route.
Well, that's when who was their receivers coach? It was like Terry Robisky or something, who was like
Was
this
he really?
just this crazy like 40-year veteran, and like you got Kelvin Benjamin and Zay Jones, not like Zay Jones was having to tell people where to line up on the field. I think he had to tell Kelvin Benjamin where to line up a couple of times.
Yeah,
like I remember his mom tweeting about it.
Was it his mom or his dad, or was it both?
It was his mom. It was shockingly his mom, because Zay Jones's dad likes to tweet. I've been notified that my connection is unstable. So if I exit, you know what happened. But yes, with Kelvin Benjamin, again, he wasn't good in 2017 with the Bills, but he also wasn't terrible. I remember seeing signs of hope, and then 2018 comes again, just falls off the cliff. Obviously, did not want to be here. I remember. Again, I was an intern for the Bills that year. I'm sure I've told this story on the podcast before, but I vividly remember one day where Kelvin Benjamin, so they allowed the media to go in while the Bills were still on the practice field. They allowed the Bills to go into the media to go into the locker room and just, kind of set up before the players got back. I remember one day, Kelvin Benjamin, while the receivers are still on the field getting work with Josh Allen, Kelvin Benjamin is in the locker room, showered, and leaving before the rest of the receivers had come off the field, which was funny. And then there was the notorious story of Kelvin Benjamin and Josh Allen. I think they were in Houston in 2018. And Josh Allen goes up to Kelvin Benjamin and was like, hey, do you want to get some extra work in? And KB was like, no. Which...
That's what you want to tell your rookie quarterback. Just nah, I'm good. I don't really care about you. I'm good.
Wait, I have to say this. So Andrew writes, bro, Sammy Watkins was not good stuff. So maybe I should have made different thumbnails. So this the Sammy Watkins picture represents the Sammy Watkins trade, just as the Ronald Darby picture represents the Ronald Darby trade. The return, how it all played out, stuff like that. Like Sammy Watkins, his tenure in Buffalo is certainly not good stuff besides his rookie year, but the trade, the return, stuff like that. So I think we've talked enough about Kelvin Benjamin. Obviously,
yes, we have.
Anything you gave up for Kelvin Benjamin in that trade is too much. A 3rd and 7th is pretty significant capital in hindsight. Yeah. Not a good move.
To be fair, since we're exploring like what teams do with these trades, and we get to look in hindsight, the Panthers used that 3rd round pick to get Rashad Golden, who did nothing. So absolute banger trade all around. Great job, everyone.
So doing this, as I was writing out the trades, or writing out the moves, the signings, draft picks, stuff like that earlier, to get ready for this episode, I realized that Brandon Beebe was not a great general manager in his first year or two. Made a lot of bad decisions.
There were a lot of moves on a roster that had players.
Yes. This free agency class, this 2018 free agency class, Brandon Beane's first. Granted, he didn't have a lot of money to spend, but what he spent that money on, not good. So the Bills in that free agency class sign AJ McCarron, who did not end up playing a game for the Bills, led them to a fourth quarter comeback in the preseason.
By the way, that's right.
In week 4 of the preseason, he leads the comeback. Gets traded to, where did he get traded to? Oakland, I think.
Yeah. Because it was Brett Musburger who sent out that creepy tweet about like, oh, we can't wait to have Mrs. McCarron here in Oakland. It's just like, oh God.
I don't like that. But so AJ McCarron, again, just a misjudgment of who he was as a player, of his willingness to help develop a young quarterback like Josh Allen. Just not a good move, which I think everyone probably thought when they signed AJ McCarron. Like, this guy's not a starting quarterback. What are you doing? Why are you getting AJ McCarron to be your bridge between, Tyrod and rookie? It was weird from the start. Obviously, they ended the experiment before it even really got started. Trent Murphy, who stuck around for a couple of years, never lived up to the money they were paying him, was a fine player, but again, was kind of a player that people threw around as a cap casualty for most of his time here. Also, Star Lotulelei, Chris Ivory, Vontae Davis, Russell Bodine, and Philip Gaines. David, I would argue there is not one good player here in this class.
So like we kind of went through AJ McCarron. Trent Murphy, like at the time, that was like a really like solid signing just because he had come off a good year in Washington previously. He had gotten hurt and it kind of drove his value down. He probably would have gotten paid a lot more had he not gotten hurt the year before. And Trent Murphy had his moments. I think he was a little overhated at times. But by the end of his time here, it was like, all right, you're not who they want you to be, and you're not what you're supposed to be. So you got to go. Star Lotulelei, man, what a weird journey. So like, he was the victim of just being on a bad roster in 2018. 2019 was, pretty solid, I think. Not like amazing, but pretty solid. 2020 was when the Bills defense really struggled through a lot of things. And also he wasn't there because he decided to opt out because of COVID. And that opt out meant that his contract got pushed back a year. So then the money that he was supposed to get in 2020 based on his contract structure ended up getting pushed to 2021, which meant that they couldn't really cut him at that point, even though they probably could have it, assuming they wanted to. I assume they wanted to at that point because they were just like, we tried and this isn't really working. But then they couldn't really cut him without it really hamstringing them in free agency. So they kept him, and he started off really hot in 2021, and then he got COVID, and then he wasn't available, and then it's a very weird, strange mess for somebody that like could have been and at times was a good and important player on this team. He also got a lot of money, and it was just kind of a mess. So it's a very unfortunate thing, and it's very easy to just say, oh well, he sucked, and we knew he sucked. Well, he obviously had a value, and he was like somebody that was pretty clearly on their radar from their time in Carolina. But also, like they desperately needed somebody to help their run defense at all. Like in 2017, they had 3 straight weeks where they gave up like 600 total yards rushing or something like that. They were atrocious. They needed somebody, and like I don't fault them for getting Star Lotulelei, and I don't necessarily fault them for giving a little extra money than what they probably should have.
Right, the Buffalo tax.
At that time. But it just sort of snowballed into this big mess that they really couldn't get themselves out of until it was much too late. And it was just like, all right, now they're done and it's out. And now he's not on a team either, I don't think. So
no, he's not. So the largest praise we can give for the two biggest signings, both of whom are no longer on the team or in the league, the largest praise we can give to either of them is they were circumstantially good, which I think puts the 2018 free agent class in not a good move. Again,
not a good move.
Chris Ivory, at times in 2018, was their best running back because LaShawn McCoy just fell off a cliff that year. Granted, the line was very bad, but Shady wasn't really helping himself, and Chris Ivory wasn't good, but whatever. Vontae Davis, of course, retires at halftime of week 2. Russell Bodine, very bad center. And then Philip Gaines. We got some Gaines supporters in the chat.
Yeah,
Gaines was good when healthy. I will defend Gaines to this day. If they're talking about EJ, they're right.
Yeah, like if we're talking about EJ Gaines, Philip Gaines was a disaster.
Was awful.
Philip Gaines was atrocious. Like almost unbelievably atrocious. Like, again, we've said this many times on this podcast. The one thing that, like, year to year I can feel confident in saying is that Brandon Beane, or not Brandon Beane, but Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier can coach up and put DBs in a position to succeed. The fact that Philip Gaines was that bad is astounding to me. Absolutely astounding to me.
Who is Philip Gaines?
Exactly. He was a piece of burnt toast is what he was.
He was the former Chief.
He was.
Who the Bills signed to play nickel. To compete with Taron Johnson in the slot. Lost that to the 4th round rookie out of Weber State. Taron Johnson wins it. And then so that's indication right there that Philip Gaines is not it. And then Vontae Davis retires at halftime. And Philip Gaines just kind of plays outside boundary corner, which wasn't his intended role, but he kind of just plays boundary corner for a couple of weeks until they figure out that Levi Wallace isn't bad at football.
They decided that, like, you know what? We don't really care how good or bad Levi Wallace is. We just need someone other than Philip Gaines out there.
So just not a great free agency class. Might end up going. We got 2 strong contenders here for his worst move yet. And granted, I don't know if there's anything else that's going into that category, really. Oh, yeah, and we got that one. We'll get into we'll get to that.
Okay, we'll get there.
So the 2018 draft, the free agency class was really bad. The 2018 draft class might go down as one of the more, probably the most impactful in Bills history, maybe one of the more impactful in recent NFL history. So I'm not going to talk about, they had to move around a lot in this draft class, gave up a lot of had acquired a lot of draft capital, had to part ways with a lot of it to exit the draft with the players that they did exit with. But also, I think it's kind of silly to be like, oh, the Bills traded the pick that would have been Vita Vea to get Josh Allen, because, like, okay, if the Bills stayed put, they wouldn't have taken Vita Vea. And even if you do want to include Vita Vea in the draft trade for Josh Allen, it's like, okay, yeah, Vita Vea is really good, but Josh Allen is a franchise-changing quarterback. I'll take that over good defensive tackle any day of the week. But anyway, so the 2018 draft, the Bills exit the draft with Josh Allen, who I don't know what else has to be said about Josh Allen. Very good player. One of the best quarterbacks in the league. Tremaine Edmonds, the Bills. Again,
speaking of to be determined.
Right. Say what you will about Tremaine Edmonds, but just objectively speaking, looking at what Tremaine Edmonds is, he's worn the green dot for what has been one of the best defenses in the league for the last couple of years. And he's made 2 Pro Bowls. So again, Tremaine Edmonds, at least on paper, that lives up to me to that 16th overall selection value, right? If you get a 2-time Pro Bowler who starts from day one in the middle of your defense at the 16th pick, I'm cool with it. He's going into his 5th year starting. So I'm good with that. Harrison Phillips, who we talked about, again, serviceable defensive tackle, serviceable to good defensive tackle when he was healthy. And then Taron Johnson, one of the better slot cornerbacks in the league, get him in the 4th round. Saran Neal in the 5th, who ended up, he's still a very solid contributor on special teams for this team, just got an extension. And then Wyatt Teller, who, again, good player, just not for the Bills. We'll get into that. And then Ray McCloud, who is still bouncing around, and then Austin Proehl.
Somehow.
Right. So I think that, sorry, I just read a comment. Who's the fat player?
Which one?
What are we talking?
First of all, rude. Second of all, which one? Like, we've got Marcel Darius and Star Latulele on there.
Fat player.
What are we talking about here?
That's just such a funny stretch of words that I've never read together. Who's the fat player? All right, so yes, this draft class, great move, Brandon. Awesome job. You get a franchise quarterback, a very good starting middle linebacker, or a starting middle linebacker for 5 years. One of the better slot cornerbacks on a defense that plays a lot of nickel defense. Is there anything else to say here about this draft class other than it was really good?
You managed to get a 3 or 4 year starter at that boundary corner in Levi Wallace as an undrafted free agent. I mean,
right. And Robert Foster.
Nothing. And Robert Foster, who, is still seeking wide receiver 1 status.
Right. He'll get there.
He'll get there. Yeah, I mean, and Harrison Phillips. I mean, I remember, like, by the end of this draft, I was like, man, this draft is like really good. Mm-hmm. If only they hadn't taken Josh Allen.
Right. If they got Josh Rosen, this is an A+ draft.
That was what I thought. That was totally my thought. I was like, what? Why did they have to take Josh Allen? And then, of course, like, Josh Allen is like the main reason why this whole thing succeeds, because Tremaine Edmonds, we're not going to get into Tremaine Edmonds talk, but Tremaine Edmonds is who he is. Harrison Phillips has been up and down. Teron Johnson, Teron Neal. I mean, like, these are all like solid players or good players to different extents. Wyatt Teller we'll get into later, and then Austin Proehl was a favor, and Ray McCloud. Ray McCloud, which again, like, how is that dude still bouncing around? That dude was still returning punts for Pittsburgh last year.
He was, yeah. Might do it again
for no reason.
Where is he? Is he in the league?
I think he did get signed. I cannot remember by who though. Hold on, let's have our producer take a look at this.
The thing I love about
Ray Niners.
Oh, good for him. Oh, Kyle Shanahan. Oh, well, he's new Debo because they're going to trade Debo. Ray McCloud's next Debo, obviously. The thing I love about Ray McCloud is that it was 2019, and the Bills did those joint practices with Carolina, which is where we got the Captain Munnerlyn, Cam Newton, Ed Oliver video.
Yes.
And great video. But then, Ray McCloud catches the eyes of the Panthers in those practices. When the Bills cut him, they sign him, and then he like fumbled a punt or kick very early in the season. Then he ended up back on the Bills practice squad after tweeting some stuff about the Bills and stuff like that, which was don't tweet. That's the moral of the Ray McCloud story is don't tweet. So yes, great draft class. Moving on to in season, the Bills were a bad team in 2018. Ultimately finished 6-10, but they certainly should not have finished 6-10. That was a bad roster. Which again, Kelvin Benjamin was the number 1 wide receiver for a portion of that season. So the Bills obviously were near the top of the waiver order throughout much of the season, and Brandon Beane, good on him, ended up with 2 players who are still on the roster today via waivers in the 2018 season. Granted, one of them left, and then he came back, but that was because he played so well in Buffalo that he was able to go and get another contract in Arizona and then come back when that kind of fell through. That player, of course, is Jordan Phillips, who was in Miami, didn't get along with Adam Gase because, I mean, who got along with Adam Gase? I don't know if anyone gets along with Adam Gase.
Jordan Phillips was like one of the main perpetrators of like being super anti-Adam Gase, particularly online. Like when Adam Gase got fired, I think he tweeted like a couple different things, like just sort of laughing his ass off about Adam Gase getting fired, which is just like, I don't know if there's this, like, to be a little fair, like I don't know if there's necessarily a coaching staff outside of Buffalo that's really gotten along with Jordan Phillips, or that Jordan Phillips has gotten along with. But also Adam Gase is Adam Gase, and he deserves to be fired.
Yeah.
And he deserves to be clowned on. And he totally deserved to get a second head coaching job with the Jets immediately afterwards.
I agree. That Peyton Manning phone call really works for some dudes. But so Jordan Phillips gets cut after, again, a sideline disagreement with the Miami coaching staff in either week 2 or week 3. Then the Bills claim him on waivers, and he comes out immediately against Tennessee. And again, gets like 2 tackles for loss and a sack or something. So just immediate impact, was consistently impactful throughout that year. Then he gets double-digit sacks the next year. And then, as we said, goes to Arizona and plays well, or doesn't play that well, gets cut. Now he's back in Buffalo. Also, Brandon Beane is a mad lad, because this dude was just scouting the Denver Broncos practice squad. For some reason, in the middle of the season, he saw this little 5'8" dude from Georgia named Isaiah McKenzie, and he's like, I want him. I'm signing him. And then Denver promoted him and then cut him a week after, thinking that Brandon Beane forgot that Isaiah McKenzie existed. And then Isaiah McKenzie is claimed by the Bills, comes in and gets like over 100 all-purpose yards in his first game with the Bills. And the Isaiah McKenzie story is again, just signed a 2-year extension, is still here in the year of our Lord 2022. These have to go in. Great move, Brandon. Awesome job. Just because waiver claims often are nothing moves, right? Nothing often comes from waiver claims. Again, especially on a bad team, when you're just trying to get guys at some points, you're just trying to add talent to your team, and to still have them, again, granted, one of them left and came back, but to still have them on your team in 2022, figuring to play at least semi-important roles, that's just great scouting, great, just really Brandon Beane's first, not his first masterclass, but a very good move from Brandon Beane.
Yeah. And like the last time that I can think of, and this may just be me only really being interested in waiver claims for the Bills. I apologize if I'm not scouring waiver claims for all the other 31 teams in the NFL. But I mean, the last time I can remember like waiver claims being that significant was when Chan Gailey was here, and he claimed like Eric Pierce and Scott Chandler at the end of the 2010 season. And then they both ended up being like kind of major contributors in the 2011 and 2012 seasons. That's what I remember. So great stuff. I mean, it's great to be able to get that, just a year-to-year type of player and contributor, just as someone else's trash. Like, that's true thrift store shopping mentality from Brandon Beane, which I applaud, being a worker at a thrift store.
Okay. I think that's all he did in 2018. Not a good team, but again, exits the season with what ended up being a franchise cornerback, good player at middle linebacker, and then also, dudes who are still contributing in major ways years later. So, again,
I just want to acknowledge this by spin. Peyton was just bored. Peyton Manning, we're talking about here, was just bored and decided to have some fun and made a prank phone call to the Jets. And next thing we know, Gase is in New York. Honestly, I buy that way more than the Jets looking at Adam Gase, who they had to face several times in previous years in their own division, and saying like, yeah, that's the guy we want as our head coach.
I'm sure Adam Gase is a fine guy, but I just cannot imagine him interviewing well. Like, just how he conducts himself in press conferences and things like that, and how he just kind of looks around rooms with his eyes. Like, I mean, I can't imagine.
Like, Adam Gase is basically just like a weird robot who has no feelings. And if there's anyone that could probably relate to that, it's probably NFL owners. So
it's Peyton Manning, of course.
Well, yeah, and that too.
Moving on, the 2019 free agent class. This, again, the Bills had kind of been working toward this offseason since Brandon Beane took over in 2017, just kind of, again, shedding contracts, shedding Marcel Darius, Sammy Watkins, Ronald Darby, guys who were paid or were going to be paid, to kind of give them the opportunity to retool this roster around their franchise quarterback, who ended up being Josh Allen, but just to really build a roster around their quarterback in the 2019 offseason. That was the plan. And Brandon Beane does just that. In this offseason, he signs John Brown, Cole Beasley, John Feliciano, Frank Gore, Kevin Johnson, Tyler Kroft, Mitch Morse, Ty Nsekhe, Andre Roberts, Quentin Spain, TJ Yeldon, and Lee Smith. Now, obviously, only one of these guys is still with the team, that being Mitch Morse, who is one of the better centers in the NFL, probably. Again, certainly a good investment. They just extended him. So, again, that's a good signing. None of the other guys are with the team currently, but boy, did they play their roles while they were here. John Brown, a very good number one wide receiver for the Bills. People always question, like, is he a number one wide receiver? Josh Allen made him one when he was here, really helped Josh Allen take that next step in his development. Same with Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley more so than John Brown, helping Josh Allen take that next step in his development, just serving as a reliable safety blanket or whatever, over the middle of the field for Josh Allen. And then John Feliciano starts at guard for a couple of years. Frank Gore helps Devin Singletary acclimate to the NFL. Kevin Johnson, we talked about EJ Gaines being a serviceable second cornerback for a year. Kevin Johnson, when he was platooning with Levi Wallace, was serviceable in that year. Tyler Kroft, kind of a bust. Mitch Morse, again, good. Ty Nsekhe, good or fine swing tackle. Andre Roberts, good kick returner in Buffalo. And then Quentin Spain, again, weird circumstances with Quentin Spain, but he was a good guard for that year. I got to put this in either good stuff or great move.
Yeah, I'm kind of debating that. I think the main thing that brings this down is probably Tyler Kroft. Not because they signed Tyler Kroft, because he was like a decent player in Cincinnati, but they gave him like a pretty decent contract.
Big boy contract, yeah.
Yeah, like they gave him more money than he was actually worth, and not only did he not play super well, he also like got hurt pretty often. Like it just was kind of whatever. That's to me, that's the main thing bringing this down. But like John Brown was fantastic, especially in that first year. He had his best statistical season with the Bills here in 2019. Cole Beasley was absolutely fantastic and so important to this offense for the last few years. Feliciano, like perfectly like average to below average, but that was still better than what they had. So it felt like a real genuine step forward. Frank Gore was Frank Gore. Like he was what, 36 years old at that point. Kevin Johnson was a really solid player for them, platooning with Levi. We already talked about Mitch Morse, Ty Nsekhe. Ty Nsekhe was kind of somebody that like probably could have started at right tackle more often than he ended up doing. Who was starting at right tackle
in that year? Dion was at left tackle.
Dion was at left tackle.
It wasn't. No, it wasn't John Miller. It wasn't. No, who's the other dude? It was John Miller. Was the guard? Jordan Mills. Was it Jordan Mills?
He wasn't.
Couldn't have been. I don't know who the right tackle was in 2018.
2019.
It really doesn't matter. They got Daryl Williams.
It matters now. It matters now that we brought it up. 2019. We're having our producer.
This is going to drive. This is going to drive me nuts. And then obviously, it wasn't. Who was it? You know what? It doesn't matter. We can't be taking up airtime here. I'm gonna go. The only thing stopping me from putting it in great move is that none of the guys, really only one of the guys, are still here. But knowing how important this team was, this was the transitionary team. This free agent class was the transition between the Bills of old, drought era Bills, into, oh, this team's going to be really good. We kind of actually started to see the makings of a consistently good team here with this free agency class. So I'm going great move unless you can. I'm saying this was a great free agency class, given what it meant to this team. How, again, they went out and went 10-6 after going 6-10, go 10-6 the next year, make the playoffs, and ever since then they've been the dominant team they are. I'm going to go great move unless you can, convince me otherwise here.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Do we know who the right tackle was in 2019?
God, it was Cody Ford. It was Cody Ford.
We'll get into
It
him.
was rookie Cody Ford.
Gross. The 2019 draft happened as well.
There's our transition.
Again, they did not trade up in this draft. They just stayed put, let the draft come to them. This was Brandon Beane's strategy entering the draft. He told himself, I'm going to stay put at number 9 and I'm going to get Ed Oliver. And somehow, actually not somehow, it's because the Giants took a dude named Daniel Jones, whitest name of all time. So the Bills stay put and they get their guy Ed Oliver, who has developed into a very, very good, very underrated defensive tackle. Again, get him at 9. He's still on the team, figures to play a very important role in this defense this year. They also, in the second round, get Cody Ford, who started at right tackle right away, as we just learned or remembered. I love how we collectively buried that in our minds. We just forgot Cody Ford was a dude. So Cody Ford, whatever. Devin Singletary, fine player. Figures to be running back 1 this year in a committee. And then I think most people are agreeing that he's going to just become a free agent and then go elsewhere this offseason because the Bills do not really have the money to pay a running back, right? They're just going to continue circling through these rookie contracts unless a dude just comes out and kind of shows that he is the guy, which I don't think Devin Singletary has shown any indication of being consistently. And they also take Dawson Knox, who struggles for his first couple of years in the league to really establish himself as a true starting tight end. And then last year emerges, I think he led the team in touchdown catches, just a very nice, reliable weapon for Josh Allen, a dynamic weapon for Josh Allen at tight end. Also, Voshon Joseph, who never played a game for the Bills.
Yep.
Jaquan Johnson, who solid special teamer. Daryl Johnson. That's all I'll say about Daryl Johnson. You guys know, if you're
number 1 in our hearts.
You know Daryl Johnson's my guy. But they trade Daryl Johnson for a draft pick. So, that's kind of, they're working. It's cyclical. And then also Tommy Sweeney, who was a football player who was still on this team. Ed Oliver and Dawson Knox, I get it up there, but it's also Cody Ford being an unequivocal bust, Devin Singletary being fine, and then Voshon Joseph in the I'll go good stuff. Unless does this seem fair to you?
Daryl Johnson, 7th round, getting like a rotational 7th round or a rotational edge player who's also really good on special teams. Really solid, like really, really good. Voshon Joseph did nothing. Okay. Jaquan Johnson, whatever. Dawson Knox, really good developmental player. Devin Singletary, he is who he is. His floor and his ceiling are probably a lot closer than what they probably really thought at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Cody Ford has been a disaster,
Yep.
and Ed Oliver has been very, very good, as we have said on this podcast. So I'd say getting a very good start, a good couple of starters at defensive tackle, running back, and tight end, plus flipping one of your 7th round picks for another 7th round pick after he contributed to your defensive end rotation and your special teams. Yeah, I'd call that good stuff.
If you asked me at this time last year, where am I ranking this? I'm going average to not good, because Ed Oliver, he was good, but he was the one above average player out of these players. But obviously you see the leap Knox takes last year, and you see the consistency from Oliver, finally becoming that more consistent, that the flashes become more consistent for Ed Oliver. So those two are enough for me to kind of outweigh Cody Ford not being good, Devin Singletary being average, Voshon Joseph not playing. They come away with a player who I think we both agree is going to take an even further leap this year in Ed Oliver and potentially become that game-changing defensive tackle. And then they get a good tight end in Dawson Knox. So I am fine. But again, if chat wants to argue here and say it's completely average, I would listen to it. I would listen to that argument for sure, but I'm putting it in good stuff. Now, this offseason, the Bills, they did something crazy. They traded for Stephon Diggs. Again, they exit the 2019 season 10-6, went to the playoffs, lost in the wild card round. But the question is, do the Bills have a true number one wide receiver? Is John Brown a true game-changing number one option? I thought maybe he was, but I was like, they should draft Laviska Shenault if they want a number one option.
Who? You've never talked about him before.
I'm a big Laviska Shenault guy.
Is he that Lafayette Pitts guy that you keep talking about? Or
did I skip? I skipped. We're going chronological order. I skipped. Forget I said anything about Stefon Diggs. In the 2019 offseason, before the Bills go 10-6, they trade Wyatt Teller. Wyatt Teller, look, I'm a toxic person in general. I am a bad guy. Why is Watkins even on this list? Because Brandon Beane traded Sammy Watkins.
We talked about this. If you're confused, go back to the beginning of the podcast so you can make sense of this. Don't come in an hour into this and ask why you're confused.
No, it's cool. We're cool, but that's why Watkins is on the list, because he was traded by Brandon Beane. So this has been a bad 5-minute stretch here for the kid. I'm jumping around my years. Wyatt Teller, I'm a bad person. I was happy when the Bills traded Wyatt Teller because I was tired of reading Bills Twitter saying that Wyatt Teller was good and he was going to take a jump in his development. And I was like, he was bad last year. Like, the only reason you thought he was good is because the Bills offensive line was trash and he was just less trash. And also he has long hair. That's why you like Wyatt Teller. And so when they traded him, I was like, yes, I'm not crazy. Brandon Beane agrees with me. Turns out we were both wrong. Wyatt Teller goes to Cleveland, develops into a very good offensive guard, gets paid in Cleveland. So yes, obviously in hindsight, the Bills should have held on to Wyatt Teller for at least another year. They received 5th and 6th round picks in the trade. And they used the 5th in the Diggs trade, and then they used the 6th to select Tyler Bass. But even all things considered, right, you could have used different picks to trade for Diggs and get Tyler Bass if you really wanted to. So you lose a very good starting guard, which is a big position of weakness for the Bills right now. Yeah. You kick a young one to the curb before you really give him the chance to develop, and you get really not that significant of a return. So I think it's fair to say this was not a good move from Brandon Beane.
Yeah, it's something that's also informed his his insistence on keeping Cody Ford around for as long as they have, because I mean, he even said this offseason, like, they felt like they gave up too early on Wyatt Teller, and as a result, they want to kind of just let it ride out with Cody Ford, just to see, like, hey, maybe this guy who we thought like really highly of at one point can actually be salvaged. And like, we talked about how, Aaron Kromer might be the guy to do that, but it seems unlikely. There is something to the fact that he was able to at least learn a lesson from that, but also it's pretty bad. Right. It's not. And to be fair, like, Wyatt Teller went to a great situation in Cleveland, where he gets to go to Bill Callahan, who's one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL, and he gets to go to an offense that is like really well suited for his play style and his skills and his strengths. So it makes sense. It makes sense that worked out for them in the way that it did. But yeah, it's a sort of poor job by being not willing to be patient with him. And, you pay the price for that. And at the time, getting 2 5th-round picks for your previous year's 5th-round pick was like, oh yeah, like that's
value.
Great. Yeah. Now you look back, you're like, oh, jeez.
Right. I do think Wyatt Teller had made a bad impression on the coaching staff, if I remember correctly. Like, I don't think I remember hearing reports that he was in the doghouse. That's why it took him so long to get on the field, despite the Bills' offensive line being very bad in 2018. Again, just not a good situation for Wyatt Teller in Buffalo. In hindsight, should have held on a little longer, should have let him develop. But, it is what it is. Okay, so now, Stefon Diggs. I just prefaced this,
That's
but
right.
we're actually at this point now. 2019 happens. Bills go 10-6. Josh Allen is showing signs of being a good quarterback. No one thought he was going to be what he is now after that season, but you could win with Josh Allen, as evidenced by the team going 10-6 and making the playoffs. And so after that season, they go out and they acquire Stefon Diggs for 4 draft picks from the Minnesota Vikings. Those draft picks ultimately they make a couple trades. I think they made it 5 draft picks, but those picks that the Bills trade ultimately turn into Justin Jefferson, Cameron Bynum, Kenny Willekes, good name, Zach Davidson, and Janarius Robinson. Justin Jefferson is obviously the big name there, and then the Bills also receive a 7th round pick coming back, and that turns into Dane Jackson. So that's good. So as I just said a couple of minutes ago, I don't like to talk about the draft picks, the players they were used on, because who knows what the Bills would have done with those draft picks, given or if they were in that situation. Like I said, if the Bills stayed put at 12 in 2018, they would not have taken Vita Vea. So it's silly to include Vita Vea in the Josh Allen trade. But with Diggs, that was the Bills' biggest need that offseason, was wide receiver. And then given how the draft board fell, when they were at 22, Justin Jefferson, not only probably the best player on the board, but the best player on the board at a position of need. I think it's safe to say that the Bills would have taken Justin Jefferson that year had they not traded that pick for Stefon Diggs. So it is a bit more fair to say it was Diggs for Jefferson. So, but I'm not necessarily going to factor that into my determining here. Again, it was a lot of capital to give up, but you get one of the better wide receivers, the player, in my opinion, who really helps Josh Allen take that leap from being serviceable quarterback, win with quarterback, to you win because of him. Again, just on the field kind of helps with that swag. Off field, they have that chemistry, that camaraderie, that friendship. Stefon Diggs helps Josh Allen become the Josh Allen that we know today. And again, Beane had to give up a lot to get that player, to get Diggs, but the Bills are the Bills or that they are today. The Bills are this Super Bowl betting favorite, analyst favorite to win the Super Bowl. They are that team, due in large part to Stefon Diggs. So again, regardless of the capital they gave up, I think it's safe to say this was a fair move, or a great move from Brandon Beane.
Yeah. I mean, this was also after they failed to acquire Antonio Brown.
Right, a year after.
Shout out to Antonio Brown for
I should have included that.
Wanting to be here. Because, oh man, could you imagine if the Antonio Brown saga had taken place in Buffalo? I'm not sure he would have left Buffalo alive. I'm not entirely convinced of that. And so to get someone like Stefon Diggs, who wanted out of Minnesota and just wanted a new start with a quarterback that was just gonna throw him the ball, like that. What more could you ask for than getting this dude on your team, and to have the season that he had in 2020 was just absolutely crazy. And he's so perfect for Josh Allen, and it's awesome. This is one of the best moves that Brandon Beane has ever made, and it's just incredible that they've been able to not only that they were able to acquire him in the first place, but then this offseason to be able to just, when everybody else is going nuts with their wide receivers and guys are getting traded out of their teams because of contract disputes, he's able to sit him down and just say, all right, let's figure this out because we want you here. I think that's yes, Ronald Antonio Clown. Thank you, Ronald. That's what we needed.
We'll get into the Diggs extension there here momentarily.
Yeah.
But yeah, with Diggs, it's just, this is a guy who we talked about the Bills kind of dragging Marcel Darius through the mud years prior. The Vikings kind of dragged Stefon Diggs through the mud. But when all he wanted was a team to commit to him, he wanted to be the number one guy, and he wanted, a team to say, you are our guy, which is exactly what the Bills do.
He wanted a quarterback that was going to throw to him and take chances with him. And that was his problem with Kirk Cousins. It's just like they were losing games and they weren't giving Diggs the opportunity to be the player that he knew he was. He was just like, look, if we're losing games and I'm still contributing, then so be it. But like, I feel like I'm not even getting a chance to help this team the way that I know that I can. And you're committing to this quarterback who's not going to do it. Yeah. So there were a lot of frustrations with Diggs.
And Diggs, of course, there were trade rumors about him at the 2019 trade deadline. And then that started the classic Twitter bit on Twitter. That's where Twitter bits live. But started the Twitter bit of I saw Stefon Diggs at Duff's. I don't know who started it, but people would just like, I remember people were calling different Duffs to see if Stefon Diggs was there. And they were just like, what are you talking about? A great bit. So Stefon Diggs, big Duffs guy. And then also, as Art writes, even for as well as Jefferson turned out, you can never predict that. Yeah. Exactly. So even if the Bills do 100%. Stay put and get Justin Jefferson, look, there is a whole podcast that I used to do that is just full of cold takes about Justin Jefferson from me. I did not like Justin Jefferson coming out. I did not think no one thought he was going to be best receiver in the NFL, but I certainly did not think he was going to be. I had Laviska Shenault higher than him. Again, I was a big Laviska Shenault guy. I am stupid, as I said, and I'm a bad person. But with Justin Jefferson, I was not crazy about him. So had the Bills taken Justin Jefferson that year, I would have been like, not good, Brandon. That would have been not a good move. But again, they don't. They get Stefon Diggs. Maybe, again, in hindsight, whatever. But even all things considered, great trade for Stefon Diggs. Puka writes, the most incredible move was the Hyde and Poyer sleeper signings. While they are great moves.
Yes, they were not made with Brandon Beane as the general manager. Those were both made with really Sean McDermott. Sean McDermott was the one running things at the time.
But you got to give it up for Doug Whaley. It was Doug Whaley's parting gift.
Was he privy to that, though? Was he privy to those signings?
He privy to? I'll have to ask him. I'll get him on the podcast next week, and I'll ask, were you privy to the signings of Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer?
Someone call up the XFL, get Doug Whaley on the line.
He was interviewing for the Pittsburgh job, and
that's right, he was.
I wonder why he didn't get that. I wonder why. I wonder why they wouldn't hire Doug Whaley. All right,
moving on.
So the Stefon Diggs trade kicks off the 2020 offseason, and then the Bills go out and they assemble a fine free agent class. They get Mario Addison, Vernon Butler, AJ Klein, Quentin Jefferson, Josh Norman, Tyler Matakevich, Tywan Jones comes back, and Darrell Williams. This goes in completely average job, Brandon, in my opinion. Mario Addison was a fine player. Vernon Butler was not a good player. AJ Klein, fine too good when his number was called upon. But again, the cap number just got too much near the end there. That's why he got cut this offseason. Quentin Jefferson was only around for a year, not really used. I think he could have been used more in his year here.
Yeah.
And then Josh Norman was bad. Tyler Matakevich is still around as a special teamer. Same with Tywan Jones. And then Darrell Williams, again, fine.
Went from really, really good to really, really bad.
Exactly.
He went from a solution to a problem. I think we all kind of share the same sort of feelings with this whole free agent class. I don't think there's a lot of controversy. I think we all generally have come to this consensus about it. One little thing about Quentin Jefferson, it was clear when they signed him that they wanted him to be this inside out type of player, like they have been, like they're trying to do with Boogie Basham right now, where they play him at defense tackle and they play him at defensive end and they kind of just flip him around the defensive line a bit. But that plan only worked when they had Star Lotulelei available to them to be the big nose tackle, and then he opted out because of COVID. So then it was like, okay, well, now we have Quentin Jefferson, who we like, and now he has to, play a role on this team, but it's not going to be the role that we want him to play. And so he was just kind of put into a bad position. And Mario Addison, unfortunately, did not live up to the expectations that they had hoped he would bring. I mean, it's just it was misses on the defensive line for the most part, and some solid special teams guy. So yeah, completely average job is a pretty good way of saying it.
Right. Yeah. Mario Addison, I think he was like a consistent, I don't know if he was a consistent double-digit sack guy, but he was in that range, nearing 10 sacks a year in Carolina, and comes here and doesn't reach that. Now, granted, I would listen to the argument that how the Bills rotate the defensive linemen doesn't it's what am I trying to say?
It's not conducive to
It's not
building
conducive.
the
That's the word.
Yeah.
Exactly. But again, Mario Addison was fine. When I think of Mario Addison, I just think of him chasing Kyler Murray and not bringing Kyler Murray down. That was one of 3 losses on that year, and it's not Mario Addison's fault, obviously, but that's what sticks out in my mind. Average player in an average class. The 2020 draft. This is interesting because there are 2 very good players in this class.
Yeah.
But they were day 3 picks. The day 2 picks, obviously, they do not have the first round pick. They trade that for Stephon Diggs. That will not be factored in here. Second round, they get AJ Epinesa. Third round, they get Zach Moss.
Mm-hmm.
And then day 3, they rounded out with Gabriel Davis, Jake Fromm, Tyler Bass, Isaiah Hodgins, Dane Jackson. Now, with this, the question is going to be, does the value on day 3 overcome the 2 huge misses on day 2? It is day 2 of the draft, right? Yes. Epinesa, look, I would listen to the argument that, like, it's not Brandon Beane's fault just because the Bills coaching staff really didn't know what they wanted to do with him, didn't know what weight they wanted him at, stuff like that. But, like, I feel like I'm sure Beane did have some conversation with the coaching staff, and it's like, if they wanted AJ Epinesa to be a different player than what he was, then why take AJ Epinesa?
Yeah.
Like, why take why turn him into a speed rusher, which is essentially what they tried to do last year? And it's like, that wasn't AJ Epinesa's game. So it's just weird pick. And he's still, I'm not completely casting AJ Epinesa off yet, but he needs to have
it doesn't look good so far.
It doesn't look good. Zach Moss, we've said plenty about Zach Moss. Not, again, might be on the outside looking into the roster come the end of training camp. Again, I think he will make the roster, but you never know. After 2 years, we are saying that about both of these players, where it's just like their long-term future is very, very cloudy here in Buffalo. But then Gabriel Davis, again, looks to be this is his first year really as the bona fide number 2 wide receiver opposite Stephon Diggs, and I think he's going to be really good. Jake Fromm, nothing player. Tyler Bass, one of the better kickers in the league. Isaiah Hodgins, again, never has really gotten the opportunity to play. He's been injured the whole time. Hasn't gotten on the field yet. And then Dane Jackson, serviceable number 2 cornerback when his number is called. So, David.
Yes, that is my
I'm
name.
having a stroke. I'm having a stroke. Someone help me. So I was going to say Dave, but I was like, I've never called him Dave, so I don't know if that's allowed.
You shouldn't. I don't like being called.
Okay. So David, does the value of Gabriel Davis, Tyler Bass, and Dane Jackson, does that allow this to bump up into good stuff, or does the unequivocal misses of AJ Epinesa and Zach Moss keep this in completely average job?
When we're talking about the good parts of this draft, we are talking about a wide receiver 2, a kicker, and a serviceable corner 2. All 3 are good players that I like. They're not enough to make up for missing on a defensive end and a potential starting running back. And not just missing, but like strong missing, like to the point where it's like these 2 guys don't even seem to really factor into this team moving forward.
Yeah.
After 2 years. I mean, it's just, I don't really know what to do with that. And Jake Fromm's gone. Now more famous for like exemplifying the Joe Judge New York Giants era by being the guy who was forced to do a quarterback sneak from his own end zone on 3rd and 8. And Isaiah Hodgins, we're still waiting for any regular season action from him.
Right? I cannot wait. We get a couple of banger Isaiah Hodgins articles from a bunch of outlets every year. I can't wait for the first one this year. I'm going to retweet it. And people watching this
maybe show, I'll write one.
People watching this show are going to be like, okay, he's ironically retweeting that. But when it's going to be funny. It's going to be great. Like, great article. Whoever writes it. It might even be a Cover One person. I'm going to feel like an asshole. But I'm going to be like, great article. Watch out for Isaiah Hodgins this year. But so does this go in completely average job?
Yeah.
Or maybe even not a good move.
No, I think getting Gabe Davis and Tyler Bass and Dane Jackson is enough to say average.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is what it is.
We've got contract extensions now. I'm just going to
Yes, we
rattle
do.
these off.
Yeah, this won't take too long.
Yes. So Tre'Davious White extension, 4 years, $70 million. That was signed in the 2020 offseason, I do believe. He was momentarily the highest paid cornerback in football. Brandon Beane resetting the market with Tre'Davious White. Now he's seventh in average annual value and ninth in total value. So for Tre'Davious White, again, reset the market with him, but now one of the better cornerbacks in football, regardless of what the ESPN polls tell you, or the Instagram polls that you see, whatever. Tre'Davious White, I think, is better, certainly better than the ninth best, which is the total value of his contract. And then seventh in AAV, that seems more than fair for Tre'Davious White.
Yep, I would say great move, Brandon. Awesome job.
Good extension again, and that was the thing about Tre'Davious White is I remember being like, I'm sure that every person was saying this. I wasn't unique in saying this, but it was just like Brandon Beane has to reset the market with Tre'Davious White because if Jalen Ramsey gets a deal before Tre'Davious White, that screws everything up. So again,
you always want when you have this sort of like when you know that there's a lot of players at a particular position that are going to be getting paid soon. You need to be the first one out there and just bite the bullet and say, if we want to keep this guy, we just got to pay him. Because if we don't pay him first and we don't pay him now, we're going to pay so much more later when we know we're going to keep him.
Right. Yeah. So he does. He gets out in front of it, gets what is now a very fair deal for Tre'Davious White.
Yep.
Deion Dawkins extension. This might have been before the Trey White extension. It was around the same time. 4 years, $60 million. He was at the time the fifth highest paid tackle in football. Now he's 21st in AAV, 16th in total value. Again, I remember at the time being like, that's a lot of money for Deion. That's a lot of money for Deion Dawkins. I think he's improved since signing the contract. And again, comparatively, 16th in total value, 21st in average annual value. Seems fair for Deion Dawkins to me.
I think it's more than fair. I think that his improvement towards the end of the season last year made me feel more confident in that. I think he's a good player, and having like a starting caliber left tackle is really, really important, obviously. Mm-hmm. He's also just like a great personality and really is one of those guys who loves being in Buffalo and is a good leader and just like he brings a lot off the field. I think that I think is really, really good. I'm gonna put that with I'm gonna put it with good stuff. I'm gonna put it with good stuff.
I agree. Good stuff seems fair. Matt Milano extension. This was the next year. He was set to hit free agency in 2021. Everyone figured he was gone. Nobody thought that the Bills could factor him into the cap, to the long-term cap structure or whatever. Probably didn't figure into the long-term plans, but he takes not necessarily a team-friendly deal, but he takes less than a lot of people thought he was going to get from a bad team on the open market to stay in Buffalo. 4 years, $44 million contract. I can't really compare that to other linebackers because Spotrac they put edge rushers in with linebackers, with outside linebackers. So I cannot. It's not fair to compare Matt Milano's contract to Khalil Mack's contract. So I will not do that. But yeah, 11 million AAV for Matt Milano seems more than fair to me. Again, this is like teetering between great move and good stuff because Milano, not a flawless player, but certainly worth the money they're paying him. And the fact that they could get the deal done at all, to me, is impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was pretty certain that he was going to end up in Cleveland because they had a ton of money and a desperate needed linebacker. And then he re-signed with Buffalo. I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. And it wasn't some insane deal. It wasn't some cheap deal either, but it wasn't absolutely, insane. It's a great move, Brandon. It's a great move.
Great awesome move, job. Brandon. Awesome job.
Yeah.
Wow. Is that his best yet?
No.
Yes, that's better than the drafting of Josh Allen. Okay. 2021 free agent class. Again, this is kind of a holdover class, as someone said earlier in chat about the 2020 free agent class. This one, I think more so is kind of a holdover class. Emmanuel Sanders, again, who was a 1-year platoon wide receiver 2. Mitch Trubisky, 1-year backup. Taiwan Jones gets signed again somehow. Where does he keep going? I feel like Taiwan Jones has been around forever, but apparently he's signing with the Bills every offseason. Jacob Hollister doesn't make the team. Matt Breida is a fine player. F.A. Obata, fine player. And then Joe Giles Harris is a practice squatter. I was going to put this – I can't put this in not a good move just because looking at what is in here, like Kelvin Benjamin trade was a disaster. 2018 free agency class wasn't good. Wyatt Teller trade, very bad. Nothing in here is like really bad, but it's all just like
kind of like average to below average.
Yes.
Like F.A. Obata was like a really solid rotational piece and could kind of go inside out. Mitch Trubisky like was never needed, but like theoretically speaking, having him as your backup quarterback when you're trying to make a Super Bowl push, really good and a smart move. Taiwan Jones, really good special teams guy. Jacob Hollister was a surprise cut from preseason. I think that's something that they probably regret when they had to keep deactivating Tommy Sweeney down the stretch, but that's neither here nor there. I don't know what Joe Giles Harris ever did. And Matt Breida provided something from the running back position for a few weeks. It was truly only a little bit, but I personally appreciated it because in the 2 weeks that he scored touchdowns, I started him in fantasy football because I was that desperate for running back production from my fantasy team. So yeah, I would say completely average job. It is what it is.
I did fantasy insider trading for the Thanksgiving game because we at Cover One, I think, had gotten word that Zach Moss had been deactivated for the game. And I was like, I don't need Matt Breida, but I'm going to pick him up so no one else can have him. And then he scored 2 touchdowns or whatever. So if that's insider trading, come get me, whoever is in charge of fantasy football insider trading. Put me in jail. Try me. I'd love to see it. Rant over. The 2021 draft class. This might be my first to be determined, just because
I am willing to agree with you on that.
Because Greg Rousseau showed flashes in his rookie season. Again, he's the guy this offseason where people are like, oh no, they're expecting a lot from Greg Rousseau. It's like, we'll see what happens. But people are saying that Greg Rousseau is taking that next step this year. Again, wait and see. Boogie Basham never really had the opportunity last year to show what he's capable of doing. Spencer Brown, again, flashes of good and bad at offensive tackle. We'll have to wait and see what he develops into as a consistent player, if he does develop that consistency. Touchdown Tommy Doyle catches a touchdown in the playoff game. Hilarious, right. But his first couple of snaps at offensive tackle, not very good. And then they started bringing him in for jumbo sets, and the run game started to get going. So again, if that's Tommy Doyle's role, just like extra offensive tackle occasionally, and he's good at that, cool. But I don't think you have a long-term starting tackle in Tommy Doyle, but I don't think they need him to be that. And then also Marquez Stevenson doesn't really look like an NFL wide receiver. Damar Hamlin, I think long-term could be a nice safety, maybe a guy who takes over for either Hyde or Poyer, but I mean, too early to say really. And then Rashad Wildgoose and Jack Anderson, they try to practice squad him, they end up elsewhere. So it's unfair to say it's not a good move or completely TBD. Average or good.
TBD.
Man, that's what that category is for. That's right. The Josh Allen contract.
Hold on. Before we get too long-winded, because we're already an hour and a half in, are we putting the Josh Allen contract anywhere other than great move, Brandon? Awesome job.
6 years, $258 million, $150 million guaranteed, most in NFL history. Was second in AAV and total value, now fourth in AAV. It's a lot, but that's what you pay. That's the going rate for. That's a going rate,
for your franchise quarterback that you haven't had in like 20 years. So
right, it's fine. I could say it's a lot, and it's going to take up like 20% of the salary cap eventually, or like 15% as the cap rises. But again, that's what quarterbacks get paid. That's just how it goes. So you gotta. You lock him up for 6 years. That's cool. Acquire Case Keenum for a 7th round draft pick.
I say
he
good
did that.
stuff.
They did that this offseason. Obviously, like you'd think to be determined, but then also it's like what we've seen enough from
We
Case
know who
Keenum,
Case Keenum is.
right, to know that that's a good trade. Like
Yeah.
that's a 7th-round pick for a backup quarterback who you can win with. Should God forbid something happen to Josh Allen, that's a good maneuver there from the Bills. Stephon Diggs getting an extension. You kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. With Diggs in this offseason of wide receiver carousel, of wide receivers wanting to get paid. Stephon Diggs, he never really did anything about it. It was just kind of all media driven about maybe Stephon Diggs wants out of Buffalo for some reason.
Right.
But, maybe he wants to leave. Maybe he's going to Dallas with his brother. That doesn't happen. Stephon Diggs gets a 4-year, $96 million deal. 5th highest paid wide receiver in the NFL in terms of total cash, which is, I would say he's around there in terms of where he stacks up against other receivers. So that seems more than fine to me. Good stuff or great move?
I say great move because everyone else had to get rid of their wide receivers and the Bills didn't.
Bills got to keep theirs, yeah. That's because right. Again, they're good buddies with Josh Allen.
That's right.
So this is I said earlier that Brandon Beane had a rough first few months on the job. Just his moves weren't that great. But ever since then, I mean, look, the great move category greatly outweighs everything else. And then the Von Miller signing again, signing Von Miller to a 6-year. I don't even remember how much money he gave Von Miller, but it's really only like a 3-year deal.
Yeah.
And this is, the crown jewel of what appears to be a very, very solid 2022 free agency class. Von Miller, Jordan Phillips, and Shaq Lawson coming back. Also adding Daquan Jones and Tim Settle at defensive tackle. And then O.J. Howard and Jamison Crowder. Again, you kind of have to put it in to be determined.
Yeah.
But on paper, it's good stuff.
Yeah. I'm okay with either one.
But like, I don't want to look stupid a year from now where it's
we'll put this and the 2022 draft class in to be determined.
Because that's really only fair. But again, both look good. Again, the 2022 draft, Kaiir Elam figures to be the long-term boundary corner opposite Trey White. James Cook, that receiving back, who figures to have a big role in this offense. And then Terrell Bernard, Khalil Shakir, Matt Araiza, Christian Benford, Luke Tenuta. All looks good on paper, but again, I probably said that about AJ Epinesa and Zach Moss after they drafted him. I was like, they're going to be good. Well, we'll have to see how they perform. So it's now time to determine what his best and worst moves were. We'll start with his worst move, worst one yet, which, according to us, he has not made a bad transaction since 2019.
I'm okay with that.
A crazy idea, a crazy thought that Brandon Beane has arguably not made a bad transaction signing draft pick, or no, he's made bad draft picks, as we talked about, but he, not like a historically or monumentally bad decision since 2019. So his worst move, David and chat, is it trading 3rd and 7th round picks for Kelvin Benjamin in 2017? The 2018 free agent class as a whole, headlined by Trent Murphy, AJ McCarron, and Star Lotulelei, or trading Wyatt Teller after his lackluster rookie season for 5th and 6th round picks?
To me, it kind of feels like it has to be Kelvin Benjamin, because he wasn't that was not just bad. It was like laughably bad. Like that was to a point there was a point with Kelvin Benjamin where it was like becoming just a straight up joke that he was even on this team. Like not even just among Bills fans and media, but like for the whole like football world as a whole. Like it didn't make any sense why they held on to him for as long as they did, other than the fact that they just truly did not have anybody else on that roster that was worth keeping at wide receiver. But like at a certain point, you just had to get rid of it and let the man eat his Popeye's biscuit.
All right, yeah, he did try out as tight end with the Giants. Didn't work, but
and apparently Dave Gettleman conspired against him to not let him succeed with the Giants.
I will buy. I am fine with Kelvin Benjamin being the worst move, but for me, it's Wyatt Teller, just because, again, they gave up on him so quickly, arguably never really gave him the chance to develop into the player that he is today. And like, you could argue like, okay, yes, he got into a better situation in Cleveland, and they didn't let him develop because he was a 5th round draft pick. Like, they really didn't expect him to be anything. And it wasn't until he got to that new situation, maybe that's what propelled him into becoming the player that he is, was that new situation. But for me, it is Wyatt Teller, just because they gave up far too early.
To me, it's more about, ultimately, they gave up too early on Wyatt Teller. They also still got something in return for Wyatt Teller.
Mm-hmm.
They gave up stuff for Kelvin Benjamin. Like, and what did they get out of that?
That's the thing with Teller. It's like they thought this was the best move. Like, they just didn't think he had it. They didn't think he was a fit, and so they got what at the time perceived decent value. Whereas with Kelvin Benjamin, it was just like a miscalculation. It was reactionary because you had traded your number 1 receiver earlier in the offseason, and then you were somehow competitive and you needed another one, and you made a miscalculation based off of your familiarity with a player, which that wasn't what he was at the time, and you gave up decent value to bring in a player who ultimately ended up doing more harm than good. So we got sorry, I'm laughing because we had a sex bot just come into chat, and StreamYard blocked it. It just knew that.
Oh, I did it.
Oh, you did?
I did it.
Oh, AI match 84%. I thought that meant StreamYard was like 84% chance that Naked HD XYZ Future is a bot.
No, I think AI match 84% is part of the bot name.
Interesting.
They're getting worse.
I agree. As Ralph Wilson writes, thank you for joining us, Ralph. He knew Benjamin, should have known better. Exactly. Yeah. This was just a miscalculation of where the Bills were, who Kelvin Benjamin was as a person and player. Just, again, should have known better. So, yes, I am fine with that being worst move. Now, this is where the broader conversation comes in, because we have a lot more to choose from. I think I know what I'm going to say for Brandon Beane's best move as Bills GM, or best, thing that he did. Waiver claims were great. A great eye for, showcased a great eye for talent, but that's not better than a lot of the other things. 2019 free agent class, awesome transitionary class, helped that team develop into what it is. Again, not better than these two things. And then all the extensions, great value. But again, they had to get the players before they could, especially Allen and Diggs, they had to get them before they could extend them. So for me, his best move is between acquiring Stephon Diggs and the 2018 draft class as a whole. I have to give the edge to the 2018 draft class as a whole, because you get a franchise cornerback. You get a starting middle linebacker for 5 years. You get one of the best slot corners in the league, and then you get a consistent contributor on special teams in Siran Neal. All dudes, you haven't extended Edmonds yet, but they still have really big roles on this team, some bigger than others, but they still have roles 5 years later. I think it's the 2018 draft.
I agree, because to be able to stake your claim in that quarterback class, that you wanted Josh Allen when everyone else was going after Baker and Darnold and Rosen. I mean, there weren't a lot of people who wanted to stake their reputation on Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. And those are the two guys who end up being the best ones of that group. And to be able to get not only just your franchise quarterback, but like you said, one of the best starting slot corners in the NFL, a legit special teams gunner in Siran Neal, and a up and down, albeit middle linebacker who still has potential. As we all know, it's all about potential with Jermaine Edmonds. But I mean, it's hard to do a lot better than that. It's hard to do better than just getting your franchise quarterback, and that's what they did when they drafted Josh Allen.
And you say pinning your reputation on him. It's not like Brandon Beane was like this experienced executive at the time, like 20-year
Right.
GM who had been at the helm of numerous drafts, who was like, oh no, there's precedent for, I've done this before. I know that I can make this work. This was his first draft. And he comes out here and drafts essentially the same mold on both sides of the ball. The tall, athletic dude, and one's going to play quarterback and one's going to be, the signal caller for your defense.
He basically said, this is my stamp mark, and it's going to work or it's not. I'm going to live or die on this.
Which is crazy. And it's crazy that it worked. At least the quarterback worked, which is really all that matters. Les Brown writes, how is Vontae not on the list of worst moves? He is in the, again, I should have made different thumbnails, but he's in the 20.
We should have made a separate tier for Vontae Davis.
We should have, but he was clumped into the 2019 free agency class, which
2018
free agency class, which was in contention for worst one yet. Just had to give the nod to KB. I think that wraps it up. Brandon Beane's a good general manager.
Really, it's weird, right? Like that a team with Super Bowl aspirations is well run by a good general manager. It's weird.
It is weird. So I think, yes. Let us know in the comments, either in the live chat or the YouTube comments if you're watching this later. Don't leave an iTunes review with your reaction to this specific episode. That might get confusing, where it's just like, review of the whole podcast, 3 stars. No, I think Wyatt Teller was the worst move. Like, interesting. But that's a weird review for the entire podcast. But so, yes, if you've gotten this far, thank you for listening. Make sure to subscribe to Cover One on YouTube. Again, great content here throughout the week. Exciting film room tomorrow, and then Disguised coverage going deep. Cover One Buffalo, that's the flagship, right? I should probably remember that one. And then subscribe to all the individual podcast feeds on iTunes. Leave reviews if you feel so inclined. Consider subscribing to Cover One Premium, which is relaunching in a relatively new fashion here pretty soon. But as of now, Cover One Premium, there you will have access to the Cover One Premium Slack, where you can talk to all of your favorite Cover One personalities and a bunch of Bills fans about a wide variety of topics, not just the Bills, a bunch of stuff. Always good conversations going on in that Slack chat. Make sure to follow Cover One on all social media accounts at some variation of @Cover One. Make sure to follow David on Twitter at.
You can follow me at DFAUXY or at DFoxy. Kyle, where can the people follow you?
They can follow me on Twitter at Kyle Salagi. That's the @ right? I put a little look. I make the graphics for the Cover One Roundup. I know,
do a great
right?
job of it.
I do a really, really good job. It's difficult.
A+ out of 10.
The tasks are difficult. But look, I got one of the little tags now that all the other Cover One shows have. We're officially a Cover One show, David. How does it feel?
Well, it feels good to not be in violation of copyright anymore. So that's pretty solid.
Right. Yeah. It's all but a hack. I hacked into the Cover One YouTube channel, and that's why we haven't gotten canceled, is they don't know. They don't know that the show's going on. Thank you guys for watching. We'll talk to you next week with training camp stuff. Okay.
Yes.
Bye-bye.